Okay, so I'd like to welcome you all to the number 108 of the Circle of Wine Writers Let's Talk About sessions. And today the topic is the diversity of modern Italian winemaking and its adaptation to climate change with Riccardo and Renzo Cotarella. I'd like to extend a welcome to Circle members and obviously those of you who are not Circle members, and also those of you who are members who haven't joined before. If you'd like to find more about the Circle, you can look on our website. But just to give you a summary, the Circle was founded in 1960 in the UK, and today we have 270 plus members. Traditionally, we were based in the UK, or predominantly based in the UK. Now 50% are outside of the UK. And we comprise of wine writers, broadcasters, educators, and other professional communicators. If you'd like to join the Circle again, also you can go to our website. And now I'd like to hand over to Michelle Shah, who will introduce our speakers today. Over to you, Michelle.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea. And I'm absolutely delighted to present two icons of Italy's wine world. That's two brothers, Riccardo Cotarella and Renzo Cotarella. So just to a brief introduction, Riccardo Cotarella is the founder of consulting company Chiasso Cotarella, now consulting for more than 100 estates in Italy, France, Palestine, Japan, Georgia, and Spain. Riccardo is also professor of enology at the University of Tuscia and national president of Assoenology, Italy's national enologist association, as well as being awarded recognition as the president of Global Enologists. Renzo Cotarella joined Marchesi Antinori as head of production in 1993, and in 1998 became managing director. And since 2005, he has been nominated Chief Executive Officer at Marchesi Antinori, which today encompasses a number of independent wineries within the group in Italy and globally, including most recently Stag's Leap wine cellars in the US. In 2003, Renzo was nominated president of the Consorzio of Wines of Orvieto, a position he held until 2011. So today, Renzo Cotarella continues his work as director of the Chianti Classico Consortium and Consorzio Vino Toscana and Federvini. In 1979, the brothers founded what is now Famiglia Cotarella, one of the most important qualified wineries in Italy, with 200 hectares of vineyards and nearly 2 million bottles sold worldwide. So thank you both very much for your time and welcome to the Let's Talk session. And I think we're going to commence with Renzo Cotarella. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Andrea, and of course, Michelle, for this invitation. It's an opportunity for us to talk a little bit about wine, about Italian wine, and about what we try to do in order to, to make the wine more and more, in a certain sense, modern, more in line with the time we live. And with the style we want to make. So as you say, I've been working with Antinori since '79. That was, my first time. I worked at Castello della Sala, and Antinori was a company completely different than now. Now the company is, practically is independent in terms of production. We have 100% of our wine under the Antinori name that are produced with our grapes, with our vineyard. We did a lot in the last 30 years by planting vineyard on the best place in Italy, and not just in Italy, but also in the rest of the world. We have something in Napa Valley. We recently, as you say, we bought Stag's Leap. We have a winery in the Maipo Valley in Chile. We have another winery in Washington State, in Red Mountain. So we have, and I had the chance to really making wine everywhere, South and North Hemisphere. In the last, let's say, 40 years. My first harvest was 73 together with Riccardo. So I did 50 harvests in the North Hemisphere and 20 in the South Hemisphere. So, and through all this time, for sure, we had the chance to learn a lot, especially for local people, to learn different climate conditions, different variety that we were able then to import in a certain sense in Italy. Carmenere is one of those. We discovered the Carmenere in Chile, and now we have Carmenere in Tuscany, in Maremma. We became, let's say, growers as Antinori, and becoming growers, we were obliged also to expand the wineries. The last one, the most important one, is the one we have in Chianti Classico, as we always had our roots in Chianti Classico, even if as a company we were quite often considered more oriented to produce Super Tuscan than Chianti Classico, as I mean the flagship of our wines is of Antinori Stignanello, which is a Super Tuscan, but producing in Chianti Classico. Having said that, what changed really in the last 30 or 40 years? Changed a lot. For sure, the climate. For sure, our ability to interpret the wine. And also, you know, we acquire, let's say, harvest after harvest, you know, more, not just knowledge, but in my opinion, a little bit of culture about wine, which I think is much more important than knowledge. Knowledge is indispensable, but then at a certain point, you must acquire culture, which means to be able to really understand nuances, to be able to change the wine if you feel that you have to change in terms of style, but also not to follow too many rules, because if you want to follow the rules and if you want to do things every year as you did before, practically you will never really challenge yourself. And so this is another important point for Antinori, how to really try to modify what we have done until now. So as a mission, we have here the presentation. As a mission, our mission is for sure to produce elegant and refined wine with, let's say, great intensity and very savory, but with a territorial character, which means it seems simple, but it's not simple. You know, let's go ahead with the presentation. What we used to do in the past. I mean, we were in a period, let's say, in the 80s, 90s, we were in a period where, I mean, the production per hectare was quite high, the density was much low. You know, the grapes had difficulties in achieving the alcohol. In a certain sense, they were a little bit anemic. And so we decide, I mean, after studying and studying, I mean, not just us, but everybody, we decided to change our viticulture. That happened in the 90s, when also Antinori decided to increase a lot our vineyard. And our viticulture was based on knowledge that came from, let's say, a period of cold climate, as I said before. Cold climate because, I mean, Sangiovese had difficulties in achieving the maturity because it was a little bit too acidic, and the color was not enough. And all the, let's say, selection was made in order to select Sangiovese that were able to achieve ripeness much earlier, have much more color, maybe a little bit less acidity. And also the vineyard were completely different because, I mean, we decided to have vineyard much more dense in order to utilize as much as we can all the leaves in order to produce sugar, in order to achieve the maturity before the fall, before the rain. So everything was done in order to anticipate as much as we could the maturity, in order to be sure that once we arrived in October, practically the harvest was over. That was the approach. So rootstock, quite, I mean, not so vigorous, density, quite high, training system very close to the soil, all, let's say, vines close one to the other, because at that time we used also to use herbicides that we don't use anymore now. And so all this, let's say, concentration of grapes, concentration of vines, concentration of leaves, with the global warming, with the increase of temperature, create wines that now, I say sometimes, they are not easy to drink now with the approach we have toward wines we have now. In a few words, I mean, in 2000, let's say in the 90s, even in Burgundy. They try to produce Pinot Noir as a Cabernet. Now, if I want to say something quite strong, maybe too strong, we try to produce Cabernet as a Pinot Noir. So everything changed. The introduction of the barrel, the need, great wine must had a lot of wood in order to really, through the wood, to show the wine, to show the character, to show the weight, to show the muscles. And that was something that, was the result of our choices. As you know, we cannot plant the vineyard every year. So once you did some choices, then you have to keep them. And just to give you an idea about the global warming and about the, let's say, the production of sugar. Thanks to a vineyard, which is, let's say, let's leave aside the distance on the row, but they have 2 meters between the row. In 1 hectare, you have 5 kilometers of row, which means more or less 10,000 square meters of leaves that make the photosynthesis. All of them trimmed in order to have, let's say, always, perfect shape, but with a lot of new leaves that are responsible for photosynthesis. If instead of having 2 meters, you have, let's say, 3 meters, you have 3 kilometers, 333 meters, which means to reduce by 1/3 the surface of leaves that are able to make the photosynthesis, to produce sugar. So I think, having said that, I think that we need to move a little bit in a different, let's say, direction in terms of implanting vineyard. Having vineyard less dense, in my opinion, allow the vines to have more space, allow the roots to have more room to take also water, because as you know, in Italy, we are not so, it's not so easy to irrigate. We don't have so many reservoirs that allow us to irrigate. And so to have a little bit more, let's say, volume for the roots could be very positive. And, we need to change a little bit the vineyard, but to change the vineyard requires years and years and years. You cannot tomorrow, let's say, let's replant all the vineyard. I mean, it's a lot of money. As if you remember what happened in California with the IXR1, I mean, many companies in the 80s, they were obliged to replant all the vineyard. It was really an incredible amount. They needed an incredible amount of money. So the climatic change practically allowed the producer to produce wine rich, full body, high alcohol, and so practically now I don't think no more modern anymore. People that at least I don't want to drink anymore. Not like this. I want to taste, but I don't want to drink. As I said before, the climate season is much shorter, and for sure that creates some let's say discrepancy in terms of balance inside the grapes. They are not in balance because quite often we talk about, let's say, phenolic maturity and content of sugar. And we forget sometimes also the taste, the fruit, that is part of the taste. It's not just tannins and sugar, but also the fruit. And these grapes, all overripe, in my opinion, they don't produce wine with class. What is a wine with class? A wine with class is a wine where, in my opinion, you recognize the place, the variety, the vintage, and the style. And just to give you an idea, I'm quite, let's say, critic with some, let's say, California wines, especially in the past, because I don't think you can produce wine making, let's say, picking the grapes at 28, 29 brix, adding 15% of water, bring the brix to 25, and then ferment the wine. I tasted some wines in Napa Valley on the 60s, beginning of 70s. They were completely different. They really had the character of Napa Valley. Now, you have the character of Napa Valley, but you don't recognize any more place. You don't recognize any more Sarsgleep from Rutherford or Rutherford from, let's say, Oakville from Calistoga. Because all these grapes that are picked too ripe, they lose the character of the place. So I think a great wine must have the character of the place. You have to recognize why Tignanello is a great wine, in my opinion. Because when you taste Tignanello, even just with the tank, at the tank during the harvest, you recognize immediately Sangiovese from Tignanello than the Sangiovese from Badia, and they are nearby. So I think we need to work, all of us, we need to work in order to manage this climate change. And replanting the vineyard, we need to think better about the style we want to produce. You know, my history is not, I have an history which is not as a winemaker. I was graduated in agriculture. And I think, you know, it is important to know the wine for, let's say, a vineyard manager, in order to manage vineyard according to the style of the wine you want to produce. There has to be a clear passage, a clear, let's say, link between grapes you make and wine stylistically you want to produce. And that is something that quite, often is not understood completely. The winemakers now, they are more and more, let's say, close to the vineyard, luckily, and my brother is one of those. But for many years, I'm talking about in the 80s and the 70s, but also in the beginning of the 90s, winemakers were more, let's say, had more a chemical approach than an agronomic approach. And I think if you want to produce great wine, you must have both. You must have for sure an agronomical approach in order for you to produce grapes that are instrumental to the wine you want to produce in terms of style. So we need to rethink a little bit whether the area, I don't have a formula, but I just, you know, I say if you, let's say, I do some consideration, let's say that, consideration. We need to rethink about not fertilization, as I wrote in my presentation, but nutrition. Vines, they must eat something, you know, especially in a vineyard which is intense as a production, because we produce every year. There is not, even if I say that we need to enlarge a little bit the distance, they are very dense, and the vineyard have to be, let's say, they must have something to eat. So this is the reason why I say nutrition instead of fertilization. Fertilization has the idea of pushing the vines to produce more. Nutrition is something normal, something that everybody have to do. And we have to give the wine to the vine this, all the substances that allow them to produce properly. Then we need to understand, even here, there is a lot of discussion about organic matter. I think, from my experience, that the organic matter is important, especially in soil that have not a lot of capacity of keeping the nutrients. But organic matter, a very high organic matter, very rarely produce great wine. When I say great wine, wine with finesse. So organic matter is important, but without exceeding too much, in my opinion. And then also all the fertilization with organic matter, especially made in hot climate, you lose the nitrogen in a few days. Then we need to really rethink about the rootstock, because in the past, all the rootstock were very, let's say, weak, in order to, not to push too much the production per vine. And all this with rootstock, they don't resist to the climate change. They don't go deep enough. They have the roots that are not really enough developed. So we need rootstock that are able to resist. They are able to go down in order to stay at a temperature that doesn't change because the climate condition during day and night. They go to 2 meters, probably the temperature remains stable, all the season. So we need a different rootstock that is able also to capture all the water you need. Then we need to try, in my opinion, to make a lighter approach to the production, which means I was really a fan of cordon spur pruned vines. More and more, we are modifying from cordon to Guyot, let's say, to cane pruned vines, because I think they are a little bit better exposed on the, let's say, on the you say, on the area of exposure. I mean, they are better exposed because, I mean, you don't have clusters that are close one to the other as you have in the spore. If you see the spore like this, you have two clusters here and two clusters here, two shoots here, two shoots here, and all the clusters are all together. In a cane, all the clusters remain a little bit more distant, with more distance one from the other, and that helps a lot not to, you know, to the ventilation, helps a lot not to be too close in a certain sense, not to avoid even some problem in terms of disease. So we are moving in this direction in order to have also a little bit more production per vine, having less vine per hectare. And then, you know, we need to increase a little bit production per vine, because if we produce a little bit more production per vine, you have more grapes, more yield. You also delay a little bit the time of ripening. You maybe maintain a little bit more the acidity that quite often you don't have anymore. I think the addition of acid is, I mean, the first addition we do on the wine. We used to use, let's say, concentrate mass of sugar, let's say in the 70s, as we use acid now, because I mean, with this global warming, grapes have not the right acidity. So we need to postpone a little bit the harvest, having a little bit of malic acid more. So to have a little bit more production is important. Then there is another point that I think has to be rethought, which is the trimming. The more we trim, the more, let's say, young vines, young leaves we have, and the more, let's say, photosynthesis we have. So we need to be careful in trimming, not too much. But if you have very dense vineyard, you have to trim, otherwise you don't pass through. So this is another point that has to be considered. So if we don't want to have too many laterals, we need to enlarge the vineyard in order not to trim, in order not to have more lateral, because once you trim, then you have lateral. So, and last but not least, we need to have a less direct impact of the sun to the cluster. This is another point that I think maybe 20 years ago we were doing the opposite. If you read books that were made in the 70s or in the 80s, all of them, they were talking about removing leaves. I think we need to remove lateral more than leaves. So we think that removing lateral allow the grapes and the cluster to be open, but at least to be shaded, but also, I mean, we reduce the number of leaves that are able to create photosynthesis and to produce sugar. So there are, let's say, more or less, this is what we need to do. Also in the vineyard, in the winery, we need to do something. I think, you know, all the grapes being more ripe, they don't need to be, let's say, managed with mechanical action on the skin. We need to leave, let's say, the skin to leave substance without having a mechanical action. We need to be careful in extracting too much, let's say, too much tannins, because, I mean, especially with the global warming, sometimes tannins are not completely ripe. We have to not to forget that we are in Italy. We cannot pick the grapes at 28 or 29 brix. We have to pick the grapes at the level of sugar that is allow the juice to ferment. So, I mean, sometimes with the global warming, with the old vineyard, we don't have, let's say, tannins that are ripe enough. So we need to have an extraction which is not too much. So in a few words, what I say at the end, we decide as a company to reduce the density. There is a problem with the, let's say, the law, because most of the disciplinari di produzione, rules of production, they say that you must have a minimum number of vines per hectare. I think this is something has to be changed, because that was done in a period where, I mean, we needed to have more vines per hectare in order to accelerate the maturation. Now we are in the opposite, and we need to rechange a little bit, in my opinion. Then, you know, we need to consider another point, which is important, which is we don't use anymore, let's say, herbicides. And as we don't use herbicide, we need to allow let's say, the instrument to work just below the vines, and to have a little bit less density along the row helps a lot in removing the weeds. Then again, instead of expose the branches to the sun, we have to, let's say, shade the branches. And last but not least, I think when you make vineyard, you have to have a training system which is higher than it used to be, more distance from the soil, in order to avoid the heat coming from the soil during the night and allow a better ventilation. So all these things, in my opinion, are instrumental to produce wine that are more intense, more savory, and less heavy, with a better balance. I think the food we eat now, the life we have now, require wine that are very intense, very characteristic, that really represent the place, but in a certain sense, easy to drink. I want to, let's say, close this short presentation by saying it is very difficult to make an easy wine. It is very easy to make a simple wine. So we need to make, let's say, easy wine by applying everything we know. And most of all, as I said at the beginning, we need to apply culture, which means attention to nuances, attention to small things that now we don't need to do much more than what we have done. Now it's a matter of fine tuning. In order to fine tune something, you must have the sensibility to understand where you have to work.
That's great. Thank you.
Ho buttato tutto nel cesto.
Thank you, Renzo. That's really great. We want to have some questions here. So I'd like to ask anyone if they have any questions before we go on to Riccardo Cotarella. Any sort of questions pertaining to Italy or to specifically to Renzo Cotarella's his experience, of course, which is a vast experience in the vineyards. So I would ask, what are Italy's key advantages compared to other countries or continents? I mean, what has Italy really got that's going for it compared
in Italy, you say?
Yeah.
What is the advantage in Italy? I think the biodiversity. Of course, we have so many varieties, but I think what really makes Italy, and in a certain sense even France, really unique, is this instability of weather. So each vintage is something different. Each vintage you have to work a lot in order to really understand the vintage and see what happens. I think this variability is interesting, exciting, sometimes not easy to manage, but I think this is one of the advantage of being in the old, let's say, in the old world. Just to give you an idea, we have been discussing for, let's say, 20 minutes about global warming, but 2024 was a vintage that we used to have in the 80s or in the 90s. It's not a vintage that is regular in the last, let's say, in this century. Probably is the only one which, in a certain sense, is similar to the old one. And most of our winemakers that are 40 or 45, they never managed a season like this. They never had, let's say, a season and an harvest where sometimes alcohol was not enough. And that is the beauty of the place. This is the beauty of Italy, in my opinion.
Right. Well, thank you, Renzo, for that. Maybe we will start with Riccardo, and then please, everybody, if they have any questions that come to mind, please do put them on the chat. So, Riccardo, over to you. We can't hear you. Non ti sentiamo. No, non ti sento.
Now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Michelle, thank you, Andrea, for inviting me to this very important meeting. And thank you also for introducing the Italian winemaking, the Italian wines, the Italian grapes. It's very important for us to show to the world our richness in terms of the grapes and the wines. Well, my topic is first of all the diversity of modern Italian winemaking and its adaptation to climate change. My brother also talk about this problem, but I would like to say you that for me, it's not so dangerous, the climate change for Italian varietal. Michel, as you know, the Italian varietal are 90% very late harvest, late ripeness. It means that Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Montepulciano, Aglianico, the most important red varietal, Italian varietal, tell you the ripeness in the past, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later than today. What happened in the past? The grapes met the storm, the rain, the fog. In this way, they cannot get the best ripeness. Often we obtain the grapes with the botrytis and with a low sugar, low acidity, because during the fall was very useful to have the fog, especially the fog and the rain. Now we anticipate 2 or 3 weeks the ripeness, and we have very nice grapes, very nice bunch, very nice berry. So with the right sugar, with the right acidity. But to obtain this advantage is not to say just, okay, we anticipate the harvest. You have to have a better approach to the vineyard, more scientific. Not like the people that say, okay, the people, the winemaker, isn't to put your hands in the vineyard. It's a very stupid affirmation, because as you know, the wraps of the grapes is very important if you follow the cycle of vegetation of the plants. Like my brother said before, what do we change to eliminate the problem of the climate change? We change the roots, first of all. We change the clones. As you know, every variety has so many clones. Sangiovese has more than 100 clones. Maybe we eliminate the very compact bunch, because the compact bunch means botrytis. We change the growing system from Spurpurno cordon to Guyot. We change the scientific approach in the vineyard, controlling the evolution of the sugar, the acidity, the pH. Basically, I had more than 55 harvests in my life. So I spend my time before, during, after the climate change. There is a big difference in terms of the quality, but it's very important that you know the vegetation of the vine. This is very important. For example, Sangiovese, Chianti Classico. I work in a very nice estate called Castello di Volpaia, 700 meters high. In the past, it was very difficult to get the right sugar, no more than 11.5, 12, but not just low sugar, alcohol, not just low alcohol, also low body, low character, low color. Now, we have to be careful, because otherwise, if we don't pick the grapes in the right moment, we have too much body, too much sugar, too much color. This is the difference. The problem we have with the international varietal, with the Merlot, with the Cabernet Sauvignon, with the Syrah, with the Petit Verdot, with the Mansen, because they have the very early ripeness. Too early at the moment. It means too much sugar, low polyphenol, low color, low body. This is in fact, at the moment, many territories of my country result vocated for this international variety, but inside, not just along the sea coast. In other words, I don't want to say that the climate is an advantage. but it's not so dangerous if you have a very scientific approach to the vineyard. This is my convinced philosophy, because I touch with my hand what doesn't mean this philosophy than the old philosophy. Next slide, please. Okay. Work in harmony with the cycle of nature. What I said before. If the nature change, climate change, we have to change our approach. But this is the harmony between winemaker and the vineyard. Limit the use of the chemicals, of course. Why use the chemicals if they if they are not useful? Optimize the use of the water. This is a very important problem, because now this year, for example, we have very dry summer. The fall was very rich in rain, but last year, 2 years ago, we had just also we have just the very dry season, and we suffer the dry season because we miss the water. Now we have to keep the water from the rain. It means that when we need it, we're ready to give by drops the water to the vines. Preserve the biodiversity of the soil. So I think that in the world doesn't exist another country like mine for the biodiversity, not just the soil, varietal, clones, climate. My country is so rich in terms of this, from Piedmont to Sicily. We have so many millions, billions of different terroirs. Think about Brunello di Montalcino area. So we start from the sea level to 800 meters high, with all the exposure, south, north, east, west. In every part, we have different results with the same clones, with the same winemaking. Think about the Piedmont, Langhe, think about every place. Think about Trentino, think about Sicily, think about Puglia, think about Campania. This is very rich of my country. Well, tradition and innovation. This is a very hot argument for me, because my brother and I were born in a family that my father produced the wine, like my grandfather. We are the 6th generation that produced the wine. Tradition means passion. The passion that my father gave us for making the wine. But we had to change. We had to change absolutely the approach in the vineyard and the winemaking, respect to my father and my grandfather, because we have another goal, another topic. We have to produce the wine that is good here in the United States, in Japan. Our wines hasn't to transform the characteristics if we move from Italy to the United States, like in the past. I remember when I started this profession, like a winemaker, we had a very big problem with the one where I was the winemaker, that we couldn't resolve immediately. Today is a very simple problem, because the science made the progress and we take advantage about the progress of the science. In other words, innovation doesn't mean to wrong the wine. Innovation means respect the wine. Innovation means to make the best approach, respect the wine, respect the original characteristic. Because transforming the bunch in wine is not so simple. It's not so simple. As you know, the nature creates the bunch just to produce vinegar, no wine. If you press the grapes, you leave this without any human interview, you produce just vinegar. Because this is the goal that nature gives to the grapes, not produce the wine. Produce the wine, we have to have knowledge, science, respect, because otherwise the wine is vinegar or very good the wine with the difference. This is my personal idea about innovation. Next slide. Okay. Technology, recipe of tradition. Is correct. Basically, my technology, or in general, the technology is useful also to remember the tradition. For example, my father produced the wine in a very, very ancient container, like cement, like old oak, because it exists other type of container. The wine was influenced about this. The modern visual winemaking between science, territory, and tradition is a blend, is a mix to be very important wine, white and red. Next. The coverage system, maybe you know that the 44% of the production is produced by the co-op in my country. What are the co-op? Big winery, but very little producers. The most important co-op in Italy has 1,000, 2,000 producers that own no more than 2 hectares. It means that this system is a guarantee that the vineyard is followed with a passion, with a science, with attention. In the past, the co-op in my country, in the world, was considered not good place to produce good wine. Today, in my country, co-op means quality, research, experiment, innovation, because we think about, for example, a very important one that I follow is in Alto Adige called Valle di Sarco. There are 200 producers. Every producer on less than 1 hectare. We know every producer. Every producer needs to stay in contact with me because they need my suggestion when they to be the grapes. The sugar, the acidity, the pH, the polyphenol. Basically, they become the very little winemaker because I assist them. In this way, I have so big difference in biodiversity. 200 people, 200 vineyards, means 200 types of wine. Not Pinot Grigio. Which type of Pinot Grigio? Maybe I had the producer that had the vineyard 800 meter high, or maybe 50 meter high. This means that two different wine, two different style, two different alcohol, two different acidity, two different body. This is the important for the co-op system. Other ways, so many.
Riccardo,
See,
I'm terribly sorry. I'm just going to interrupt you 1 minute because Renzo just sent me a message to say he has to go to a board meeting. And I just wondered if we could just take the 2 questions that are there for him before he leaves us. So,
che ora abbiamo fatto?
no, mancano 10 minuti, ma ci sono 2 domande per Renzo.
Scusa Ricky, ma
Sorry.
purtroppo qui ho perso l'aereo, sono in ritardo da morire.
So, Renzo, you have 2 questions there. The first is Renzo's mentioned how his approach to training and green pruning has changed. How have his preferences in relation to clonal selection changed? This question comes from Emma Dalton.
You know, clonal selection is something that helped us a lot. I think we went a little bit too further. Just to give you an idea, our vineyard at Tignanello is just a master selection. So I think I am in favor of clone selection. I'm not in favor of making, let's say, vineyard monoclonal. I mean, with just one clone. I think the right variability between different clones is the one that really make a wine more, let's say, complex. In a certain sense, the reaction of each different clone to the, let's say, weather year after year is completely different. So they have a different reaction that depends on the weather during the season. When we had the chance to vinify, let's say, different selection of Sangiovese before replanting in the vineyard of Tignanello, we noticed that there were 3 or 4 that were always bad. But there are most of the other that were good and not good enough or great, depending on the vintage. And when we replanted Vignello, we replanted all of them in order to maintain this kind of variability. So clonal selection is okay. Again, I think it's important to have vineyards that are polyclonal, and probably with the global warming to check and to reanalyze some clones that we lost at the 80s or 90s because we wanted to, let's say, anticipate the harvest, anticipate the maturation, I think could be not wrong.
Thank you very much. And we have another question there. Liz, who would you like to address your question to? Maybe you'd like to read it out.
Not too complex, Liz. No, you don't have the microphone.
So let me read it out for you, Liz.
Sorry, it's okay.
Yeah, okay.
No, I was just wondering, particularly, Renzo, you mentioned towards the end when you were talking about density of vineyards, that there were problems with the rules, the denomination rules. Is there anything actually happening now to make your lives easier to?
No, you know, the people that are involved in the agriculture are very stubborn. Riccardo was saying before, a traditional innovation, they have a tendency of not to change. The question is, well, we have done always like this, why we have to change? And but you know, of course, to change a vineyard require, I mean, a lot of money. You have to, I mean, decide to replant the vineyard. So sometimes if the vineyard is not really old enough, you prefer to keep. And also old vineyards are always better than the new one if you do the vineyard the same way. But having said that, I think we need to reduce. They are not thinking about that. As in Brunello, they are not thinking about reducing the time in wood. You know, now we have this rule that were done in the 90s. And I must say, at Consorzio del Chianti Classico, for instance, we started to talk a little bit about that. I think there are some limit. For 4,500 is maybe a limit, which is okay. Could be even less. But I wouldn't be so strict in determining the number of vines per hectare by law. I think what is important is to have a minimum number per hectare, not a maximum number, a minimum number which is like now, but has to be really a minimum. I mean, when the minimum is 5,000, I mean, 5,000 is a maximum, it's not a minimum. I think we should change and having the possibility of having, let's say, maybe 3,000 plants per hectare. And then if you want to plant a 5,000, you can plant a 5,000 or 6,000. But, you know, if we want to produce wine more, let's say, refined, more balanced, we need to produce a little bit more per vine. In order to do it, we need to enlarge, in my opinion, the plantation. Otherwise, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, you know, just to give you an idea, 30 years ago, we used to produce with 2,222 vines per hectare, 80 quintals per hectare. Now, to produce the same 80 quintals per hectare, we have 5,000, 6,000, which means each vine produces 1.5 kilos, even less. And all the leaves, that all concentrate in 1 kilo of grapes. And for sure, the sugar goes up to the roof. There is no way, I mean, too many leaves.
Thank you very much, Renzo. We will let you go to your board meeting. And I want to thank you very, very much for the time.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very sorry I was not able to give you all the time that you deserve.
No.
And I hope we will have another opportunity in the future. And you are all invited, not all together, of course, to visit our winery wherever you like.
Thank you very much, Renzo. We will now anyway continue with Riccardo. Riccardo,
ciao,
we have three.
Ciao, Rick.
Ciao, grazie.
Ciao, Andrea. Ciao, Liz. Ciao, everybody.
Ciao. We thank you, Renzo. Riccardo, we have a question here from Mark Millen. Maybe we can ask Mark if he'd like to read his question to you.
Hi, everybody. Really, really fascinating to hear the way there's the adaptations needed both for climate change, but also for the styles of wines as consumers, are seeking this elegance and class in wines that Renzo was talking about. So, Riccardo, one of my favorite Famiglia Cotarella wines is Montiano, a groundbreaking Super Lazio. And I'm just wondering about some of the challenges and changes and adaptations you've had to make with this iconic wine due to climate change, both in the vineyard and in the cantina.
Thank you for this question because, as you know, Montano for me is a flagship of my career, my family. Montano is a very particular story. First of all, in my life, I never trust the people that say this terroir is not good for producing good wine. Who said this? If you don't experiment before. In 1988, in my first trip in Bordeaux, I was a letter of the Robert Park that recommended the winery to be kind with me for visiting the winery and to taste the wine. I taste so many very important wine, to Pomerol, to Saint-Emilion. And in the last wine that I visited, Cheval Blanc, I tasted fantastic Merlot. And maybe I was so sad because I thought about my country, my varietal. Don't forget that I was born in Lazio, in Umbria, very poor in terms of the quality wines. The winemaker said to me, okay, I can send you the baths for crafting your old wines. I craft this bath on Merlot, and the first result was a sort of miracle for me. I understood that many times the soil is good, the people are not good. Because you have to experiment before to say this terroir is not good for producing Merlot, Sangiovese, Cabernet Sauvignon, or Nebbiolo. So if you don't prove, if you don't make experiments, you cannot say this. At the time, in my country, we had no more than 3 or 4 very important companies, Antinori, first of all, other a few companies in Piedmont and Tuscany. If you visit my country today, you can taste so ambiguous wines in every part of my country. This is the result of a very big revolution. And Montano for me was the first light that by this I understood, Riccardo, don't trust what the people say. Make your experiments. Montano is a son of my conviction about this rule, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Riccardo. And we've just got a couple of minutes left. I know Anna Penella is on the train and can't read her question, but she asks if the government isn't helping on this and winemakers can't follow the denomination rules, would this be risky when it comes to DOCG wine's reputation? Is it a risk for the DOCG wines if they cannot follow the denomination rules, Riccardo?
Is a question for me, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Can you translate, please?
Se c'è un rischio per la produzione del vino, se i produttori non riescono a seguire, diciamo, le regole della DOCG.
Well, the DOCG was made by people, by person. The difference, they set the DOC, that they are not, they didn't follow the evolution of the market. Because the style of the wine changed completely respect to 20 years ago. At the time, we had a very, very important reds, so alcoholic, so strong, so depth, so black in the color. Now the style is completely changed. Now the people want the rich in fruit, easy to drink, with a character, of course. Why not? But not so like stones. Sometimes the denomination think about 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But first of all, the best denomination was made by the producer. It's important to set the rules, because you cannot produce a Chianti Classico with Montepulciano or with a Nebbiolo. But I think that a certain different style that the single producer use in his vineyard, his winery, means the difference that he can produce respect to the other producer. We have probably have too many DOC in Italy, too many. Inside the DOC, there are the people very serious, there are the people less serious, because at the end, is the producer that made the wine, not the law.
Thank you, Riccardo.
This is another my very strict rules in my life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we are actually at 7 o'clock. I know you've got 3 slides left. Do you want to just summarize and finish your presentation? Vuoi dire ancora 2 parole?
No, I finished my presentation. Also because I finished my English word.
You finished your vocabulary in English.
Yeah. So thank you, Michelle, thank you, Andrea, thank you, everybody, because we need that the people in the world can know the potential of my country. Grazie veramente, grazie a tutti.
Well, thank you very much. We will send, if you anybody wants, the 2 presentations that we have. So I'd like just to say thank you both to Riccardo and Renzo for their interesting presentations and the update on what is going on in Italy now and what we can expect for the future with the current challenges in climate and market trends. So thank you both, and I know you're both very busy, and it's been great to have you on the Let's Talk. Thank you.
Yes.
Ciao a tutti.
Thank you, Riccardo.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
all.
much.
Thank
Ciao.
you all for attending.